Angel Reese is now quoted as saying, "I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we're watching women's basketball is not just because of one person." She refuses to say Caitlin Clark's name. "It's because of me too, and I want you to realize."
Angel Reese, Under Pressure. When you think about it, there have been so many classic songs written about the WNBA dump. Obviously, Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie, which directly applies to what Angel Reese and her colleagues are going through right now. An immense amount of pressure to carry this dump of a league while Caitlin Clark recovers.
What if I told you that Caitlin Clark's season-ending injury wasn't just bad luck, but the result of a calculated campaign of jealousy and physical targeting that the WNBA allowed to happen? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a pattern that unfolded in plain sight, game after game, while league officials turn a blind eye. The evidence is everywhere, from the uncalled flagrant fouls to the celebratory smirks after particularly hard hits. And at the center of it all stood Angel Reese, who seemed to believe that taking down Caitlin Clark was more important than protecting the growing legacy of women's basketball itself. When Clark went down with that final groin injury on July 15th, it wasn't just a single moment of bad luck. It was a culmination of months of physical and psychological warfare that had been brewing since her record-breaking rookie season.
Well, it all started last year, in her rookie season, where she received 20% of all the flagrant fouls in the league. And most of them came from Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky. And these weren't basketball plays. They were not only fouling her, but they were getting up, laughing about it. Laughing about Caitlin Clark getting assaulted. Any other work environment, people go to jail for what's going on.
The league had its golden goose, the player who had brought unprecedented attention, record-breaking ticket sales, and mainstream sponsorship deals, and yet they left her vulnerable to a culture of envy that treated her as a piñata rather than a peer. The statistics don't lie. Despite playing only 13 games this season, Clark's impact on viewership and attendance was so profound that her absence created a financial earthquake that's still rattling the league offices today. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because what we're about to reveal will change how you see the WNBA forever.
With Caitlin Clark injured, the WNBA will be reliant on their other stars to carry the league. I'm not just talking about ratings. I'm not just talking about attendance. The WNBA will be reliant on their other stars to maintain the interest of the mainstream. With Angel Reese being the only player with mainstream name recognition, most of the pressure, it is going to be on her to perform. And we have plenty of evidence that proves Angel Reese is not qualified to carry the league.
This isn't just about basketball. It's about how jealousy, poor leadership, and short-sightedness might have derailed the most promising era in women's sport history. From the moment Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, she was treated differently. The hype surrounding her was undeniable. She was breaking college scoring records, selling out arenas before she even turned professional, and bringing attention that the league had never seen before. But with that attention came a target on her back that grew larger with each game. The physicality directed at Clark wasn't the normal kind of competitive basketball physicality. It was something personal, something that went beyond trying to win games and into the territory of trying to make a point.
Now, what little girl wants to grow up and play in a league where you're targeted like that? How do you sit here and profess and demand that everyone take women's sports seriously when you can't even take it seriously enough to not act like a junior high queen on the court? It's stupid. That's so dumb. It looks like a soap opera.
The numbers tell a disturbing story. In her rookie season, Clark received approximately 20% of all flagrant fouls called in the entire league. Most of these came from games against the Chicago Sky and specifically Angel Reese. These weren't basketball plays. They were unnecessary, dangerous collisions that often happen away from the play or after the whistle. The most damning evidence wasn't just in the fouls themselves, but in the reactions. Time and again, cameras caught players laughing after particularly hard fouls on Clark, celebrating as if they'd accomplished something more meaningful than just playing tough defense. This created an environment where targeting the league's brightest star became normalized, even celebrated in some corners.
And last year, I noticed how much it was just Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark was taking all the hits. Caitlin Clark was taking all the abuse. But this year they've added Sophie Cunningham, she gets more flagrant fouls on her than anybody in the league besides Caitlin Clark. And Aaliyah Boston, she's been taking hits as well. But the worst thing is the consistency. So they don't call flagrant fouls, or most of the time, Caitlin Clark could be held for an entire game at a time. They don't call fouls. They don't call common.
What made the situation particularly dangerous was how the league officials responded, or failed to respond. Obvious fouls went uncalled, flagrant offenses were downgraded to common fouls, and a clear message was sent. Anything goes when it comes to Caitlin Clark. This wasn't just frustrating for fans to watch. It created genuine safety concerns. Sports medicine experts will tell you that consistent, unprotected impact doesn't just cause immediate injuries. It weakens the body's overall resilience, making athletes more susceptible to kinds of non-contact injuries that would eventually end Clark's season. Despite the physical challenges Clark faced, the WNBA was experiencing unprecedented growth in 2025. The league shattered its all-time attendance record with 2.5 million fans over just 226 games, surpassing the previous record set in 2002 when the league had 3 more teams and needed 30 more games to reach its milestone. Television viewership on ESPN networks reached record levels too, averaging 1.3 million viewers per broadcast, a 6% increase over the previous record-setting season. The expansion Golden State Valkyries set a new standard for franchise success, drawing 397,408 total fans to their home games with an average of 18,064 per game, the highest in league history. But even these impressive numbers couldn't disguise a troubling reality. Much of this growth was disproportionately driven by one player. 8 of the 10 most-watched games featured the Indiana Fever, and 9 of ESPN's top 10 WNBA broadcasts were Fever games.
I mean, it's a gut punch that basically encompasses an entire season of them. The Fever have lost so many players to injury, but obviously none bigger than Clark. And there was such a wait for this second season after her magnificent rookie season. And then, you know, the anticipation of her possibly coming back, only for that not to happen, takes a lot of air out of the room, obviously takes a lot of energy out of the fans, and is a devastating blow for not just the Fever and the WNBA.
The market dynamics made this dependence even clearer. The top media markets for WNBA games were Indianapolis, Louisville, Richmond, Petersburg, and Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville, Anderson, all markets with strong connections to Clark's college and professional career. Behind the scenes, teams had made business decisions that banked on Clark's drawing power. Organizations moved their games against Indiana from smaller venues to NBA-sized arenas, confident that Clark's presence would fill the seats. Ticket prices for these games reached unprecedented levels, with some courtside seats selling for thousands of dollars. The Fever schedule became a traveling showcase of the league's newfound popularity, but this business model contained the seeds of its own vulnerability. It all depended on one player staying healthy and on the court. Caitlin Clark's 2025 season wasn't ended by a single injury, but by a series of physical setbacks that accumulated over months.
Clark, a 2-time All-Star and the 2024 WNBA Rookie of the Year, has been sidelined suffering a right groin injury during the Fever's 87-77 win over the Connecticut Sun on July 15th. If you guys remember that game, Caitlin Clark put the team on her back in the winding minutes to give the Indiana Fever that lead. Clark also suffered a bone bruise at a later date during her recovery process.
The pattern began in May during training camp, when Clark experienced left quad tightness that caused her to miss the Fever's first preseason game. Though she returned for a subsequent exhibition, the quad issue never fully disappeared. It was merely managed. On May 26, just 9 days into the regular season, the Fever announced Clark would miss at least 2 weeks with a left quad sprain. Team officials insisted this was a different injury from what she had experienced in the preseason, but the proximity suggested otherwise. Indiana went 2-3 in her absence, struggling to find offensive rhythm without their primary playmaker. Clark returned on June 14th with a spectacular 32-point, 9-assist, 8-rebound performance that handed the defending champion New York Liberty their first loss of the season. But the triumph was short-lived. Just 12 days later, after a stretch where she shot 1 for 23 from three-point range, Clark was ruled out again with a left groin sprain ahead of a home game against the Los Angeles Sparks. The most devastating blow came on July 15th in a game against the Connecticut Sun. In the final minute of an 85-77 win, Clark drove toward the basket, dished a bounce pass, and immediately grabbed the inside of her right thigh. Visibly frustrated and fighting back tears, she left the court while covering her head with a towel. What initially seemed like a minor setback would ultimately become a season-ending injury, but the way it was handled revealed even deeper problems within the league.
We've got Colin Cowherd saying, you know what? Guess what I didn't talk about on my show this year? The WNBA. Guess why? He just come out and said it yesterday. Because Caitlin Clark was not playing. That's why. He said, I led my show, my biggest, largest national sports radio show in the country. I led my show with Caitlin Clark 6 times last year. I mean, you don't lead a show with anybody unless they can draw.
Instead of taking a cautious approach with their franchise player, the Fever and the league at large seemed determined to keep Clark on the court at all costs. After each injury, the team listed her as day-to-day and used words like precautionary to downplay the seriousness of her condition. In reality, Clark was rushing through treatments, applying tape, and returning to play without adequate recovery time. This pattern continued even after the July 15th injury. Clark underwent imaging and was initially considered day-to-day, though she missed the All-Star game and three-point contest in her home city of Indianapolis. By August 4th, Coach Stephanie White was openly discussing how difficult it was to adjust to having Clark in and out of the lineup, noting that she has so much gravity on the offensive end. The team's medical staff face an impossible dilemma: protect their players' long-term health or satisfy the overwhelming demand from fans, networks, and sponsors who wanted to see Clark on the court.
Caitlin has worked so hard throughout this time, doing everything possible to recover and return to the court, but ultimately, time is not on our side, said Indiana Fever COO and GM Amber Cox. While we will continue working with Caitlin and provide her with every resource we have available, there is not enough time left in our season for her to safely return, and her long-term health and well-being remains our top priority. We are looking forward to having her back at full strength to start the 2026 season. Clark appeared in 13 games during the regular season, averaging 16.5 points, 8.8 assists, and 5 rebounds per game, while helping lead the team to the 2025 WNBA Commissioner's Cup.
Evidence suggests that business interests often won out over medical caution. Meanwhile, the league office remained conspicuously quiet about the specific targeting that Clark endured, failing to issue suspensions or fines that might have deterred the dangerous play. The consequences of this neglect became clear on September 4th, when the Fever announced Clark would miss the remainder of the season, including any potential playoff games.
And this is what Caitlin wrote. I had hoped to share a better update, but I will not be returning to play this season. I spent hours in the gym every day with the singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling. I want to thank everyone who had my back through all the uncertainty. This has been incredibly frustrating, but even in the bad, there is good. The way fans continue to show up for me in the Fever brought me so much joy and important perspective. I'm so proud of how this team has only gotten stronger through the adversity this year. Now it's time to close out the season and claim our spot in the playoff.
In a statement, Clark expressed her frustration. I had hoped to share a better update, but I will not be returning to play this season. I spent hours in the gym every day with the singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling. While Caitlin Clark was being battered night after night, Angel Reese was cultivating a different kind of reputation. The Chicago Sky forward seemed to lean into the villain role, celebrating physical plays and hard fouls with theatrical flair that divided fans. Those who supported Reese saw it as confidence and gamesmanship, an athlete embracing her competitive nature. But to Clark supporters, it represented something darker, a player taking pleasure in the targeting of her rival. The statistics reveal an uncomfortable pattern. Multiple flagrant fouls against Clark came in games against Reese's Chicago Sky, and the timing often coincided with moments when Clark was finding her rhythm or building momentum. The cameras frequently captured Reese smiling or laughing after particularly physical encounters, gestures that many interpreted as evidence of malicious intent rather than competitive spirit. What made this dynamic particularly troubling was how it contrasted with the league's marketing efforts. The WNBA had embraced the Clark-Reese rivalry as a centerpiece of its growth strategy, promoting their matchups as must-see events. In doing so, they may have inadvertently encouraged the very physicality that would ultimately undermine that growth. The league wanted the buzz of a heated rivalry, but failed to establish boundaries that would keep it from spiraling into dangerous territory. Reese's comments after Clark's season-ending injury announcement only fueled the controversy. Rather than expressing sympathy or concern for a fellow athlete, Reese focused on herself, stating, "I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we're watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too." Notably, she refused to say Caitlin Clark's name, a slight that many fans interpreted as petty and jealous. The true cause of Clark's absence became apparent almost immediately. Within hours of the injury announcement, ticket prices for WNBA games plummeted. Premium seats that had been selling for $200 or more could suddenly be purchased for less than $60. The resale market was flooded with desperate sellers trying to unload tickets they had acquired months in advance. The impact was most dramatic in Indianapolis, where All-Star Weekend would have been billed as a celebration of Clark's homecoming, suddenly lost its main attraction. What should have been the crown jewel of the WNBA's season became a hollow event, with organizers scrambling to adjust their programming and marketing around the missing star. Television networks faced similar challenges. ESPN had scheduled numerous Fever games in prime-time slots, banking on Clark's drawing power. With her out of the lineup, those broadcasts saw significant viewership declines. Colin Cowherd, host of a major national sports radio show, openly admitted that he stopped covering the WNBA once Clark was injured, noting that he had led his show with Clark's segments 6 times the previous year, but had nothing to say about the league without her. The attendance numbers revealed the same troubling pattern. While the Golden State Valkyries set franchise records and the league overall saw increased attendance, these numbers masked a crucial detail. The most significant growth occurred in markets where Clark was playing. Without her on the court, many teams saw attendance return to pre-Clark levels, suggesting that the league's growth was more fragile than it appeared. With Clark sidelined, the WNBA now relies on its other stars to maintain the momentum she created. The problem isn't a lack of talent. Players like Aya Wilson, Nafisa Collier, and Alyssa Thomas are having extraordinary seasons, but rather a lack of mainstream recognition beyond Clark. Aya Wilson has been particularly spectacular, averaging 23.4 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks per game, while leading the Las Vegas Aces on a remarkable late-season surge. Her performance has made her a frontrunner for MVP, alongside Minnesota's Nafisa Collier, who is averaging 22.9 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 1.6 steals while achieving a rare 50/40/90 shooting season. Meanwhile, Alyssa Thomas has been redefining what's possible in women's basketball with her unprecedented all-around game. She recorded 8 triple-doubles this season, twice as many as any other player in WNBA history has in their entire career, while averaging 15.4 points, 9.2 assists, and 8.8 rebounds. Despite these extraordinary performances, none of these players has managed to capture the mainstream imagination in the way Clark did. The evidence is in the viewership numbers. Even with record overall ratings, the games that didn't feature Clark drew significantly smaller audiences than those that did. This reality suggests that the WNBA's growth may have been built on an unstable foundation, one that depended too heavily on a single player rather than deepening fan connections across the league. The most tragic aspect of this story is that Caitlin Clark's injury might have been preventable had the league taken stronger steps to protect its players, particularly from the kind of targeted physicality that Clark faced. She might still be on the court today. Had the Fever been more cautious with her recovery timeline, she might have fully healed instead of suffering recurring injuries. Had the culture around the league value protection over rivalry, we might be watching a very different postseason. Instead, the WNBA finds itself in a precarious position. The record-breaking attendance and viewership of 2025 might prove to be a peak rather than a new normal. The fans who were drawn to the league by Clark's brilliance feel betrayed by the treatment she endured, and many are expressing their anger through boycotts and refunded tickets. Angel Reese, meanwhile, faces a crisis of her own making. Rather than being celebrated as part of the league's bright future, she's now viewed by many as a symbol of the pettiness and jealousy that derailed that future. Her comments following Clark's injury announcement came across as tone-deaf and self-centered, revealing a lack of awareness that alienated even neutral observers. The Chicago Sky's attendance numbers tell their own story. Without Clark coming to town, Reese has struggled to draw crowds despite her talent and reputation. The unrivaled league that she participated in during the offseason averaged just 221,000 viewers, a fraction of what Clark Center broadcasts achieved. As the playoffs begin without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA faces its most significant test since its inception. The league must demonstrate that it can learn from the mistakes of this season and create a product that doesn't depend entirely on one transcendent talent. This will require several fundamental changes. First, the league must address the inconsistent officiating that allowed dangerous play to flourish. Clearer standards, stricter penalties for flagrant fouls, and better protection for all players, not just the superstars, would create a better product and reduce injury risks. Second, teams need to develop more sophisticated business models that don't rely so heavily on visiting stars to sell tickets. Building deeper connections with local communities, creating more engaging game experiences, and developing regional rivalries can help stabilize attendance across the league. Third, the WNBA must find better ways to market its incredible depth of talent. Players like Io Wilson, Nafisa Collier, and Alyssa Thomas are having historic seasons that deserve more attention. The league's storytelling should emphasize the diversity of excellence across teams rather than focusing so narrowly on individual rivalries. Finally, there needs to be a cultural reset within the league itself, a recognition that short-term buzz from heated rivalries isn't worth compromising player safety or the long-term health of sport. The targeting of Caitlin Clark wasn't just bad for Clark, it was bad for business, bad for fans, and bad for the future of women's basketball. The 2025 season should have been a celebration of how far the WNBA had come. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when jealousy overwhelms judgment, when physicality crosses into recklessness, and when a league fails to protect its greatest assets. As Caitlin Clark begins a recovery for the 2026 season, the WNBA must begin its own process of healing and reflection. The future of women's basketball depends on it. What do you think about the WNBA's handling of Caitlin Clark's season? Do you believe the league failed to protect its biggest star, or was this just an unfortunate series of injuries? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss our deep dive into what comes next for the WNBA in 2026.